everybody. Very happy to be joined by Jayne Cowie for tonight's author chat. You're going to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your book.
I will, but you have to give me 2 seconds to pick a book up.
That's okay.
Not organised. Right, I've got one. Here we are. Hi, everyone. I'm Jayne Cowie. This is my book, After Dark, which is the book about the curfew for men, set in a near future Britain, in which all men are electronically tagged and not allowed out after 7 o'clock, giving women unfettered, safe access to public spaces during the hours of darkness. And it follows 3 women of different ages and at different life stages, one of whom is violently murdered, and it will appear that a woman must have done it because she was murdered at night and left in a public space. So a man can't possibly have done it, but it's not a very female crime.
Good description. You were so good. When we filmed the promo, I told you that you were so good at doing the description.
Thank you.
And you said you wrote it in 2019, is that right?
Yeah, I did. So publishing being as publishing is, and often a very slow business, the book was actually written, right back in 2019. So before we had heard of COVID, before we had possibly imagined that the government would shut all the schools and shut all the shops and lock us in our homes and put us all under curfew, when that seemed unimaginable, that's actually when this book was written.
So what inspired it?
So back in 2019, I think we were really seeing sort of the fallout from Me Too. So Me Too was really in full swing. We had seen numerous high profile and very famous men brought down by Me Too. Harvey Weinstein, I think, obviously being the most famous, but there were many other men in positions of power where it had been known for a very long time what they were like, and everybody had looked the other way. And suddenly there was a push to not look the other way. And the conversation moves very much onto this idea of, well, actually, how do we prevent this sort of behavior? What do we do? And the idea of a curfew for men is not a new one. And I sort of thought, well, actually, I saw it mentioned somewhere, and I thought, well, actually, if there was a curfew for men, how would you enforce it? How would you get to that point where this came in? And what would it actually look like socially if men were under curfew? And would it work? Would it have the desired effect in reducing male violence against women and girls? Would it do what we think it might do? And so I really decided that was something I wanted to write a book about. And I said to my agent, I've got this idea. My agent's eyes lit up and she said, that's the book. Write that book. And so I did. And that's how we ended up with After Dark.
So you, in the book, the sort of curfew is in the UK and I think in a couple of other places, isn't it? But it's not like worldwide.
No, it's
there are some countries that have kind of resisted it.
Yeah, so it's very much in the book. This is something that is UK specific. So it's in Britain, but it's not anywhere else. So there's kind of this sense that the rest of the world is watching a little bit to see what effect this will have. Does it actually work? Just, watching us to see what it looks like and what it can do.
And I think that was quite an interesting concept, that you would, things probably wouldn't start like worldwide. You would sort of see, then we saw that in COVID, didn't we?
Yeah.
People did start in some places with things and then everything followed.
Yeah. This is obviously something we do see. We do see other countries, even countries we feel are quite close to us, quite related, handle issues, especially big issues, big problems, in very different ways. So I wanted it to really be kind of a uniquely British thing. I'm not sure it's something that you could bring in anywhere else, really.
So you've got 3 main women
in
your book. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so three women. One character called Sarah. Sarah is in her early 40s, newly divorced, really rebuilding her life, rebuilding her career after her divorce. So she has spent a long time, 15 years, living as a married woman and a mother in the time of curfew. So she has a really good understanding of what life was like before, what life has been like during, and the positives and the negatives of living in these two very different societies. She then has a teenage daughter called Cass. Cass is 17, almost 18, doesn't remember life before curfew, and has some very strong young opinions on curfew. She thinks it's the worst idea ever, doesn't really understand what it's for, can't believe that boys are so restricted, thinks it's unfair. And obviously is railing a bit against her mother, who is more on the side of curfew and sort of feels, well, there have been some downsides, but actually this has really improved my life in many ways. And there is also Cass's teacher, Helen, who is 30. Helen has got baby fever, is desperate to get married and have a baby. So it's about, for her, it's about how a woman of that age navigates trying to build a relationship and start a family in a time of curfew, when how you build a relationship with a man is very different, when a lot of the usual avenues to meeting men have been closed off, because obviously men are restricted.
Yes, you can't meet them in a nightclub or
no, it's all very different. There's no going out having 5 pints and seeing who turns up. You know, it's yeah, the men are at home, so it's very different. Yeah.
Although I feel just in general, with no experience whatsoever to base this on, that how you find men and things now is very different anyway.
I suspect so. Yeah, I mean, I suspect so, but I think I'm probably in a similar position to you in that, you know, online dating happened way after I had personally finished boy shopping, as it were. So yeah, I think it is different, but it's still, because curfew has had really quite broad impacts on society. So it's impacted men, not just in terms of the physical restriction, but in terms of then their ability to work. So it's impacted them economically. Women have really expanded out into the workplace because it's easier to employ women than men, because men are restricted. So all the jobs that need people overnight, women are doing it. All the jobs with a long commute, women are doing it. You know, it's really shifted that power balance for women. So how you choose a man, how you meet a man has really become very different.
So who is, of the three, who would you pick to be who's your favourite one?
Oh, that's tricky. For me, it's a toss-up, I would say, between Sarah and Cass. I think I identify quite strongly with Sarah. She's a very similar age to me, and I really sort of feel like her understanding of the world as a woman of that age really kind of resonated with me. But I think Cass is a really fiery, important, interesting character, being a young woman really on the cusp of adulthood, having very set ideas about the world and how the world works, but those ideas are based on a complete lack of experience and complete naivety. And I really enjoy that about her as a character. She really has the courage of her convictions, but at the same time, she really has no idea what she's talking about. And that I really enjoy writing.
So you said you conceived this in 2019, you took
Yep.
it to your agent.
Yeah.
And obviously then you've had the whole process of putting it out and things.
Yeah.
What is your next book going to be?
So the book I'm working on at the moment, which is hopefully for next year, it's kind of in a similar vein to After Dark. So it's kind of a speculative thriller, but it asks the question, what would happen if we were able to identify a gene which gave men in particular a predisposition for aggressive behavior? If we could test for this gene, if the test was widely available and it was cheap, and you were the mother of a newborn baby boy, would you have your son tested for it? So it really looks at the idea of kind of, can we identify these men before they do these terrible things? And if we could, really, if you, as a mother of a son, would you want to know that about your son? And what would society look like if we could test boys and start dividing them from a very early age and going, you are okay, you have got a violent streak?
I think that's is an interesting concept. It's quite tricky to know for sure, because there's some genetic studies of things like Klinefelter's syndrome, where you have extra That's wrong. The ones where you have extra X's.
Yeah, Klinefelter's is where men have additional X chromosomes.
And you can have additional Y chromosomes.
Yeah.
And there are more people in the prison population with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean that you're going to be there even if you do have it.
Right. I didn't know that, but I do know that there have been studies that have been done that have shown there does seem to be a genetic predisposition for aggressive behavior. And it seems to be to do with basically how people's brains are wired and the levels of certain chemicals in the brain, so that some people effectively are closer to hitting the trigger point of when the temper goes off than others. So some people need a small push to lose their temper, and some people need a big push. Does that make sense? Obviously, this is something which is very, very complicated. And so I'm approaching this from a very, very simple angle, as it were. It's potentially unrealistic, but it was more about answering this what if you could know this about your son in advance, your newborn baby boy, would you want to know?
Yeah. I find it interesting, but come at it from a more, I study genetics. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm aware it's very complicated, and this is a very, very simplified approach to it. Yeah.
There's a lot of ethics and things.
Oh, yeah.
That would come into play there.
Yeah, but you know, we already do test children for all sorts of different genetic things. We can test, we're testing embryos. You can test prenatally. We test children postnatally. So this idea of putting certain genetic labels on children from a very early age is something that we're already doing.
We do. They generally do that for things that it helps to test and treat early for.
Yeah.
Certain conditions where you might develop them later in life where they don't always test.
At the moment.
No, they just don't, because you might not want that diagnosis.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Do you want to know? If you could know, would you want to know?
So Sam has asked, she says you write about powerful issues. Is it hard to digest the research?
I guess sometimes it can be. So particularly for After Dark, I did look at a lot of sort of the crime statistics, where are we really at? Because obviously if you're writing a book where you're making this very clear statement of this is about male violence, men are more violent than women, and male violence is really the problem, that I really needed some statistics and some evidence to back that up. I knew a lot of it anyway, but to look at the statistics and really kind of see how big the difference is was quite shocking. And to look at differences in prison population is quite shocking. I didn't realize we had such a large male prison population compared to the size of the female population, which is tiny. Or the sorts of crimes that people are in prison for, or really how common these sorts of crimes are. So yeah, that was quite tricky to take on, because you suddenly realize you have the idea in your head that this is not rare, but then you look at the statistics and you go, actually, this is really not rare. This is in every classroom. This is in every workplace. This is men walking past you on the street. This is, somebody you work with. It really is everywhere.
Do you think, as a devil's advocate,
that
there's kind of an innate sexism in that, though? I've taught kind of multiple offenders, and the girls often have many more repeat trips to court before they end up with a sentence than a boy would.
I think absolutely there's clearly a level of sexism within it, because there's an assumption about male behavior and an assumption about female behavior. But at the same time, you can clearly see that women are not killing men at the same rate as men are killing women, or men are killing other men. So the vast majority of people who commit violent crime, manslaughter and murder are male, and we have the statistics to prove it.
So I'm a huge fan of speculative crime. It's kind of speculative fiction in general.
Yeah.
And I think speculative crime can be fascinating. One of my books of the year last year was a speculative crime novel. Absolutely loved it. But what do you think the reception is, just in general, like towards things like that? Because it's asking people to take a bit of a leap of faith.
So you mean towards speculative fiction in general, or towards?
Yeah, or just like a speculative crime novel like yours. What? Because do you think it just? I'm wondering if the audience is the same, or if it just takes more of a leap to sort of go for something like that.
I think for a book like After Dark, because the speculative nature of it, it doesn't sort of dig into impossible science or any technologies that don't exist yet. I think the idea of a curfew is totally plausible. We've had them, you know, we've had them before. We've had legal restrictions, usually placed on women, it has to be said. But those idea of kind of legal restrictions isn't new. But I think, yeah, it will appeal to a slightly different type of reader than to a crime thriller that is not speculative. But I think there's still, in a speculative thriller, the thriller element can still be sufficient to carry any reader forward, especially if the speculative element is well explained and makes sense.
What's the reception been like to After Dark?
People seem quite split, to be honest. I think a lot of people, we've had a lot of positive responses to it. A lot of people saying that it's a very interesting concept, that they're very interested in the concept of a curfew for men, and they feel that the book sort of nails into certain issues about male behavior and men and women together, and female experiences of this sort of behavior quite well and quite accurately. Lots of people hate Cass and think she's the worst, and she seems to rub people up the wrong way quite a lot. So people who hate it often hate it for that reason. Don't like her at all. Don't like her as a teenager. Don't like her as a character. So yeah, sort of split in that. And I've had the odd person saying, you know, this is basically ridiculous and sexist, but that's only to be expected, I think, really, with a book like this. Some people are going to respond to it in that way, and that's fine.
I think she is a very typical teenager.
Yes, I think so. I've met some teenagers.
Someone has asked, they said the idea of speculative crime is new to them. Do they imagine Maze Runner with crime, or something more straightforward, such as Vox with crime?
I would hope something with a plot that works a bit better than the overall plot of Maze Runner. Am I allowed to say that? Vox with crime. Vox with crime would be if it was a feminist speculative fiction, and not all speculative fiction has this sort of feminist slant. If it's speculative, it's really asking a what if question. So, you know, what if we could stop crimes before they happen? What if we could identify future victims before they are chosen? You know, what if we could genetically identify people who are more likely to commit violent crime? It's that sort of angle to your thriller. So potentially slightly futuristic or with a slight science fiction leaning, but not full on science fiction. So yeah, Vox with a bit more crime, probably.
Well, did you read any, like, go into sort of reading sort of speculative crime before you wrote After Dark?
I read sort of lots of things and lots of different things. I'm a really keen reader. I have actually read Vox. I didn't get all the way through Maze Runner. Not a huge amount. So I was reading general sort of crime, general sorts of thrillers, women's fiction. Yeah, I don't think I dug into it specifically too much.
The person who asked you that question, I presume, has just said it's a better plot than Maze Runner. You get my vote immediately.
Yes, we've all had that problem with the end of Maze Runner that doesn't make any sense.
I don't think I got to the end.
Did you not get that far? No. You didn't miss much.
Sam has said that she thinks having unlikable male and female characters in a book like this is very clever. It must have been a tricky balance to strike.
It was really tricky. I think one criticism I did kind of have from my editors really early on when we were working on the book was that all the male characters were too horrible, and I had to sort of rein them in a bit and give them a few more redeeming features. But in terms of the female characters, I absolutely didn't want to write female characters who were perfect and have them literally just sat there as perfect victims that bad stuff just mysteriously happened to happen to because they were female. These are characters with their own desires, their own motivations, who are not necessarily that well behaved, I think, and women aren't necessarily that well behaved. So I really wanted to show that aspect of the female characters. And I think it does make for this far more interesting balance of, well, he did this thing, but she did this terrible thing as well. And it makes the curfew more challenging and makes you ask more questions about, actually, is this really the right thing to do? And have we gone too far now the other way into a matriarchy where men have now just become unnecessarily completely oppressed in order to give women dominance in society? It's gone above and beyond what it was actually initially meant to do.
So you've also got Cass lives with her mum in the mother house.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
So the mother house is a building that Sarah went to live in after she got divorced. This is a building effectively like a big block of flats, which is entirely female only, and men are not allowed past the front gate. So the postman doesn't even come past the front gate. So it's kind of a commune, a collective of women living together in a strictly female only environment, so that women who actually want to cut men out of their lives completely 24 hours a day have a place where they can do that, and they can live that way if they wish. And the idea of a female only sort of collective like this is not a new idea. There are some, I think there's a couple in London actually, and all over the world, where women have chosen to live in this way. So Sarah is there because post-divorce she really just feels she's done with men, and she was offered this nice place, and off she goes to live there, and she really enjoys living with other women, building those sorts of relationships with other women, and the feeling of safety that she has when she's there.
See, I get what her motivations for doing that, but apart from Sam, who was watching this chat, I could not live with any other women. I could not live in a community of women. Can't stand it. Couldn't imagine anything worse.
It's not for everyone, but it's an option for the women that need it. And you do find, women who have experienced male violence, who have often experienced really, really terrible, frightening violence at the hands of men in their lives going forward. Once they have escaped it, the terror of men does not go. It does not go immediately, and it can extend to kind of all men. And those women often need a place simply that doesn't have men in it in order to get a grip on their terror and their feelings and to sort themselves out. It's why we have female-only domestic violence refuges. And for those places, they often have very strict restrictions. They don't have male workmen come in. The postman literally doesn't come past the gate. It really is female-only to give women who are recovering from male violence a place to do it where they don't feel frightened all the time.
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely get it. I just
not for you.
Very not for me. I don't have any friends that are women really, apart from Sam.
Well, fortunately, there would be other places to live, so it would be fine.
I would be fine. I could go and live in the men's house.
That's it. Do you really want to?
Probably prefer it, to be fair. Donna has said it sounds like heaven.
Is this in the female-only place?
Yeah.
Yeah, it smells like flowers and it's clean and lovely.
Just so. Not for me. I'm going to ask you some of our group favourite questions.
Yeah.
So have you ever acted out a scene as you've written it?
Well, according to one of my children, who shall remain nameless, I talk to myself quite a lot. So yes, that could possibly have happened, but we're in denial. So yes, I am quite prone to talking to myself and trying things out. And sometimes you can hear the dialogue and feel the beats of the scene far more differently when it's spoken out loud than on a page. So it can be a really important thing to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do read them out loud. We're thinking more like you've actually kind of
acted it out in the house when nobody's looking. It could have happened.
Or just out in general. Actually, we've had people who've done them on, like, acted out fight scenes on Whitby Pier.
Really? No, I've never done anything as dramatic as that, I'm afraid. Though Whitby Pier sounds like a good place.
That guy is legendary for the best answer to that question.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine so. No, none of that happening here, I'm afraid.
He still is a winner of the best answers to that question so far.
I can imagine.
So there's a lot of conversations about the mother house. Laura says the toilet seat would always be down.
Yes, it is, and it's always clean and nobody pees on it.
Someone said women can be just as messy, mucky as men, though. I'm with that. But then I prefer men and hang out with them a lot, so I think I'm probably like letting down girlhood anyway. I am not very tidy.
That's fine.
I'd be sacked from the mother house if I got in there.
That's it. You'd be out the door.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're going to have to leave. We've got a waiting list.
Yeah, not tidy at all. Books everywhere in my house. Sam said there's much discussion about all kinds of violence in the news at the moment. Perfect time to be covering this in your work, in a way.
Well, it's a funny thing because obviously the book written in 2019 sold in 2020, so we had a 2-year wait between the book actually selling to a publisher and the publisher actually putting the book out. And I suppose there was a slight bit of concern on my part, thinking, in 2 years, will this still be a hot topic in the way that it was in 2019? And clearly the answer is, well, yes, it is. It hasn't really gone away. It doesn't ever go away, does it? But we're still having that conversation.
So Aggie wonders why the curfew is from such a young age in your book. What was the reason behind it being so young?
So boys are tagged at the age of 10. And the reason I did it from the age of 10 was because I wanted to catch boys pre-puberty. So I didn't want to tag very young boys, to still give them freedom to go out and about with their mother effectively. But yeah, I didn't want to put the tags on post puberty. I wanted to do it just before they go into puberty, so age of 10, to catch them before they become adult sized, and it becomes a rite of passage for boys that this is what happens at the age of 10.
10 is also the age of criminal responsibility. So
yeah,
in the UK.
Yeah.
Just could be another good reason.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's 10 is kind of, I think, when children start to switch between being that very young child, very young childish child, to becoming to going on to their path, which is now their route to adulthood. So I wanted to catch boys at that age. So I said 10, that's the age we're going to do. Not 12, not 13, but at the age of 10.
Aggie said that's a clever idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we were talking about graphic novels and manga before we came.
We were.
Yeah. And one of my favourite author chat questions to ask is, would you make a graphic novel of your work?
Not me personally, because I've got the drawing talent of a stick, but yeah, I really think it would be fantastic to have it made into a graphic novel. I think it would be really interesting, and you could show all the aspects of the world that are more difficult to see in a written book. What do tags actually look like? What does the tagging center actually look like? And really show, that difference in sort of the landscape, the urban landscape, I suppose, of having tagged men, and the police coming to haul off a man who broke curfew and was taken off to prison.
I presume the tag just looked like the ones you would get when you're
Standard ankle tag, yeah, pretty much. I think so. I really wanted to use technologies which we already have, to be honest. It wasn't about stretching for new or impossible technologies. It was about expanding technologies we've already got and just making them wider in terms of use.
Sam has asked how you found balancing writing alongside promoting your work.
I mostly, to be honest, focus on writing because writing is my job and that's what I get paid to do. So I put 99.9% of my effort actually into that, and the rest of it, I kind of take a step back from a bit because I think as writers, actually, there is, unless you are famous or you have a massive platform, you've actually got very little influence and there's very little you can personally do. And a huge thing that's really important is getting a good deal with a good publisher that can get your book into the right places, that can get your book into supermarkets, that can get it promoted on Amazon, and who can do all the things that actually really help shift a book, which often, if you are an unknown author, is way more than you can personally do. So if you are a writer, then the book is the thing and everything else is kind of pushed to one side a bit, really, for me.
Yeah, I think I find things like this kind of sometimes help because you might find an author you hadn't heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
yeah. But in terms of, I think a lot of writers feel I need to be on social media. I need 50,000 Twitter followers. I need to be constantly posting pictures of stuff on Instagram. I need to be active. I mean, I do stuff, I have a good relationship with my local library and, you can do library talks and you can do all those sorts of things, but not in terms of constantly, sort of being online and trying to self-promote. I'm usually working on my book, work on the book.
Have you got any sort of in-person book events this year?
Not at the moment, no, but obviously the book hasn't been out very long and things are just starting to get going again, really, post-COVID. So nothing planned at the moment, but hopefully we will have some things planned for later in the year.
No crime festivals or anything like that for you?
Not at the moment.
Fair enough. Laura Hamilton has said she's intrigued to read your book, especially after reading The End of Men. 90% of men wiped out by a virus. As the way women stepped up might have parallels with Jayne's book.
Yes, so obviously this book is different to The End of Men because in The End of Men, all the men have died. In this book, the men are still here, but they are at home indoors for 12 hours a day. And that restriction has allowed women to step forward because it's made men take a step back. So I think what we've effectively had, or what I tried to have, is kind of a shift in society back, I suppose, going back, a few generations now, where women were always at home with the children and men went out to work. And that was the very traditional family setup. In this book, men are now at home and women are going out to work. And as soon as you become the group that goes out to work and you have power in the workplace, you have more money. And as soon as you have more money, you have more power in all sorts of different areas of life.
Laura, if you want something more like The End of Men as well, I heartily recommend a graphic novel series called Why the Last Man. That has only one man left remaining on Earth.
Yeah, poor bloke.
It's very good. It's a very good read. You've been asked if you got standalones or series planned after book 2.
After book 2, do you know, I'm not sure where we're going to go after book 2. There's nothing serious planned yet. I kind of have a few ideas that I'm working on, but it will probably be another standalone at this point rather than a series. I'm not quite ready yet to invest in a series. Taking on a series is a huge commitment as a writer because you're committing to many, many, many years of your life if a series takes off. So it's really got to be the right character and kind of the right genre and the right story to commit to a series, I think. And I'm writer-wise not at the point yet where that's something I want to do.
What about outside your current genre? Would you write outside?
Possibly, if I had an idea which was which excited me. When you are picking an idea as a writer, one thing you really need to bear in mind is that if a book is going to be published and it's going to reach publishable standard, this is going to be a book that you are going to have to write and then rewrite again and then keep working on long beyond the point at which you are so bored with it that you really wish, you know, you could go work on anything else. There will still be work to do on that book. So you really need to pick an idea where you feel that your boredom threshold is going to be quite a long way down the road. And you're going to be able to live with this story and live with this idea for, it could be two years. So if the right idea came along, then yes, I would switch genre, but it's about the right idea.
Fair enough. What is your planning like for a book? Are you
terrible? No, that's not true. I've been writing a long time. I've written a lot of dreadful things. I've written a lot of things which have failed. So it took me a really long time to reach the point where I was actually writing at a publishable standard. I think because there's so much to learn. When I first started writing, I didn't understand how to plot a book at all. And I literally just sat down and just wrote until I had 90,000 words and then went, oh, look, I've written a book. But of course I hadn't. I actually just had 90,000 words of basically waffle. The more I have learned about plotting and the more I understand about plot, I now plot the books in quite a lot of detail up front before I actually start writing, to try and avoid having that situation where you've written 90,000, 100,000 words of a thing, which is not actually a story. It's just a sequence of stuff happening. You really need to have a lot of things nailed down in advance before you start. And there will be people that say, I can't do that. I don't do that. I'm a pantser. I just sit down and the story just turns up on the page. But for me, with experience, that doesn't work and you have to plot in advance. So I would have synopsis, a detailed plan of what my chapters are going to be, what points of view I'm going to have. And you can fix a lot of problems and prevent your writing yourself into a dead end quite well if you have that up front.
You do find people who, you've got to find the way that works for you.
Yeah.
I'm always, generally the people I've talked to who write just sit down and write and don't have a plan, often write really complicated books. And you're always amazed at how they've managed to get all that detail in.
Because they've also had, you don't know how much editorial input they've had or how much rewriting they've had to do to actually make the book make sense. So there's also, you know, you also have to bear in mind that with a published novel, huge amounts of work goes on behind the scenes and with experienced editors, and the book that initially sells, the book you initially submit, and the book that actually gets published can be two completely different animals.
You've been asked if you'd resurrect one of your ideas that you
have thrown away in the dead pile. I think probably not, but probably only because by the time a book kind of enters the dead pile, as a writer, personally and creatively, you're kind of done with it. You've worked that story out. You've told yourself that story and you're kind of over it, really. So you want to move on to something new and something fresh. And certainly a lot of the ideas from the early days wouldn't make good books anyway, because they were written from a place of complete ignorance. So they're not necessarily good ideas anyway, so probably not.
So what have you read recently this year that's been a standout book for you?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I've got the worst memory in the world. I'm trying to remember what I've read this year. I read Hilary Mantel, Giving Up the Ghost, which is her autobiography, which was really fantastic, which I think is a really important book. And I think a lot more women should be reading that book. It's about her journey through illness, her diagnosis with endometriosis and her surgery. And I think it's a really important book and everybody should be reading it. Fiction wise, what have I read this year that I've enjoyed? I just finished reading a book at the weekend called, I want to say, The Nobody Man, which is about a woman who writes a book about a serial killer, and the serial killer then reads the book that she has written about him. He's never been caught. And so she's one of his victims who escapes. She writes a book about her experiences and he reads the book, and the book strokes on a really interesting way with these two points of view. And that I thought was really original, really interesting. And I would recommend that book.
Nice. So if you're not good at remembering that, who are your favourite authors then?
Favourite authors?
I call them like your shut up and take your money authors.
Oh, who would I always buy? I really like, there's an American author called Nora Roberts who writes, I think she's written about 300 books, just goes on forever. Anything she's written is really good and I really enjoy. I really have enjoyed all the Robert Galbraith, the J.K. Rowling detective books. I've really enjoyed all of those. I think they're really good, really well done. I really like Lisa Jewell. I think she's really clever and tells really intelligent, interesting stories about really interesting but relatable characters. So her books I've read a lot of and I really enjoy.
If you very much like the Robert Galbraith books, I heartily recommend Bill Todd.
Now, him I've not heard of. I shall make a note of that so I don't forget.
He is one of our author members and he writes a book series featuring a guy called Danny Lancaster, and I would say they are better than Robert Galbraith.
But similar style.
Similar style.
Yeah.
But I've read more of them.
I shall look out for them.
So my recommendation.
Lovely, thank you very much.
So we've talked about your reviews and things like that. Have you had any TV interest in your book?
Yep, we have, but I'm not allowed at this moment in time to say very much about it. So I can't. So I was like, I can say yes, but I can't tell you anything about it because of where we are, kind of with the company and contracting and various things. But yes, we have.
Fair enough. That's good. Have you cast it in your head? Do you have an idea who you would like to play?
I would really like, I think, Keely Hawes to be Sarah. I think she's about the right age and she's quite fierce. I think she would make a really good Sarah. Helen is a bit more difficult, but I have, to be honest, spent more time casting the men, I think, trying to work out who I would like the men to be and who would play Tom and who would play Greg. But yeah, Keely Hawes I would like as one of my female characters. And Caroline Quentin, going back a really long time, from Men Behaving Badly, if anybody remembers that, as the woman that runs the mother house. I would like Caroline Quentin to come in and boss everybody around.
Sam has asked if you've watched any good crime series or documentaries recently.
Good crime series. I did just watch kind of a crime series, a little bit, Our Father on Netflix, about fertility fraud and the doctor in America that had, according to Wikipedia, 96 children at the last count. So not a super crime sort of crime thrillery thing, but clearly it is some very dodgy and illegal behavior, and that I just watched and I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So if you haven't watched that, I would recommend it. And my husband also recently made me watch the program on Netflix about Ted Bundy's victims. There's a program that focuses very much on the women rather than on Bundy, himself, which is also really interesting. So I think so many times with these cases, everybody knows the man, but nobody knows the name of or anything about any of the women. So that program, I think, is really good.
And there's a great book about Jack the Ripper's victims that looks at.
Yeah, the Hallie Rubenhold, that one. Yeah, I've read that one. Yeah. And she writes really interestingly about the women. And I think what's really interesting about that book about the Ripper victims is her exploration really of how Victorian society conspired to put these women in his way, through, you know, the poorhouses, the way they were treated when they didn't have any money, the work that was available to them. But yeah, it really all conspired to just literally put them in his way.
It was really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, really well done. Really interestingly done.
So one of our other group favourite questions is, what are your most memorable moments as an author?
Most memorable moments as an author. We've had a lot with this book, I think. So when this book sold, we had sold at auction in the UK. So we had interest from multiple publishing houses. And when the book went out on submission, you know, this is kind of the dream that everybody hopes for, that you will get interest from multiple editors. And that was really exciting. But what happened after that was it then went out on submission in America. And when it went on submission in America, I got a preempt, which means that one editor comes forward in advance of all the others and basically says, will you deal a deal with me now to take it off the table and not let anybody else see it? And I remember having a phone call from my agent kind of on a Friday night saying, we've got the preempt, they've offered, do you want to take it? And it was just the single most exciting, memorable thing. That's really the pipe dream, I think, when you get that deal. And that's what I was hoping for, and that's what I got, and that was really amazing.
You've been asked if you'd undertake any courses to help with areas of writing books.
Have I, or would I? Oh, do you know, I've done all sorts of things. So over the course of 10 years, I've done online courses, I've done writing retreats. I did a couple of writing retreats with a writer called Julie Cohen, who is a writing teacher. And I did quite a lot of work with her sort of early on in my writing journey. I've read lots and lots of the how to write books. I have to add, I don't have a creative writing degree. I don't have any official sort of writing qualifications. Most of what I know, I taught myself. But for me, I think courses can be really important if it's the right course. But what you need is a course that teaches you the nuts and bolts of how fiction works, and not a course that is just about cheering on word counts. You need somebody to actually sit down and say, this is how you technically make this work. This is how you structure a story. This is how plot works. This is how you write good dialogue. And you really need to learn those technical things, because a story is not just some kind of magic that comes down from the ether. I mean, going back a really long time ago to when I was a teenager, I actually did English language A-level at college, and we were supposed to do creative writing for that A-level. And I remember getting all the way through the course, 2 years, and then finding out there was a creative writing exam, having done no creative writing at all. And the teacher's justification was, you can't teach creative writing. You can either do it or you can't. So there's no point teaching it. That's why we haven't done any. And he was wrong. He was utterly, utterly wrong. So I am a great believer in courses and in learning how to do things properly. But most of what I know, I taught myself, which is why it took such a long time.
Good answer. Aggie has asked in which country your book has been most successful so far.
Well, do you know, it's not been out very long, so I actually don't know. I can't tell you. I don't have numbers, so I can't tell you. But in terms of where I've had the biggest deal, it's America.
Is it out in the US as well now?
Yeah. Yes, it is. So it's out in the UK. It's out in the US. It is due to come out translated into several other languages as well, but that won't be probably until next year. So UK, US is it at the moment.
Is it on audio?
Yes, it's on audiobook. So Amazon have it through Audible for audiobook.
A lot of our members really like audio.
Well, I have listened to a bit of the audiobook and it's really good. So if you are into that, I would recommend it. The actresses that they got in to do it are excellent.
Did you get to choose who read the book, or?
I did. So initially we picked, the way it works is they send you, the publisher sent me a short list of actresses that they suggested for each character. You get links through to effectively their online CV, so you can listen to voice snippets from all of them. And you say, these are the ones I really like. And then the publisher goes, and if they can do it, then they do. So yeah, I got my choices. So I was pretty happy with that.
Good. Aggie has asked if you'd considered having your book translated to Polish.
Nothing to do with me. Unfortunately, I don't get to make that decision because I have an agent. So she deals with all those sorts of things. If it was offered, then yes, absolutely. But at the moment, it hasn't been offered.
So
in
it's
Polish.
It's
not in Polish at the moment. But if somebody wants to offer, then yes, I would, but not at the moment.
And Sam wants to know if you've got different covers and titles in the US.
Yes, I have actually. I'm trying to see if I've got an American copy up here. I might have. In America, I can't see one. Hang on. No, I haven't got one. Sorry, wrong part of the house. I'm unprepared. In America, it's actually called Curfew. It's not called After Dark. But yeah, completely different cover for the Americans.
Fair enough. What's the most recent scene you've written, without giving away a spoiler?
So today I wrote a scene with a woman whose sister and teenage nephew have just turned up out of the blue, having disappeared for 5 years, and she has had to let them in the house but is not pleased to see them. And the police have just turned up at the house looking for them, so she's even less pleased to see them now.
Fair enough. That one's hopefully going to come out next year?
Yep.
And then do you have any more books on contract, or is that it?
On the current contract, no, that'll be it. So then I'll be out shopping for hopefully a new contract to carry on working. But yeah, 2 books on this contract.
Fair enough. Aggie has said it's a shame there's so many good books but not translated into her native language.
Sorry.
She's lucky she can read in both, but her mum can't. It's looking like she needs to change profession to be a translator.
Definitely should. Sorry, Aggie.
Do you know, sometimes I think I had a friend who did Chinese at university.
Wow.
And apparently that's a really well-paid job, being a Chinese translator.
I can imagine there aren't many people that can do it either. I think it's probably, yeah. Wow. I could not do that.
No, I'm not gifted with languages whatsoever.
No, not happening for me either.
So we've got about 6 minutes left of our chat. I'm trying to think if I've not asked you all of our group favourite questions. Because we have quite a few. Oh, she says she's on it. Aggie. Excellent. I think it would be really appreciated, because I know we have other members in the group, Aggie, who want books translated into Polish. So if it's a thing, do it.
Yeah, it's definitely a job.
I'm actually going to see Aggie soon, I think, at an event we're doing in June.
Brilliant.
That'd be good. It's nice to meet authors of your favourite books, isn't it? And other fans of books.
Yeah, definitely. You can have really interesting conversations about books. I like just to talk to people about books in general, what they've enjoyed and what they recommend, and particularly people who read things that I would never have come across. That's always my favourite, to find new things that I wouldn't have picked up.
I'm just loving that we can go out to book events again. I went to my first one at Waterstones the other day, and it was just so nice to be back.
Out of the house?
No, well, I've been out of the house anyway because I worked through my lockdown.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a thing, but it was just nice to be going to a book event again.
Yeah.
Like, just because they've not happened, and it was just nice to go back to one.
Yeah, go back to a bit of normality, and definitely.
You've been asked how you celebrated Publication Day.
I'm trying to remember.
It wasn't that long ago.
I know, I'm sorry. I think, how did we celebrate Publication Day? Yeah, I went out for dinner with my husband and my kids, and we celebrated sort of quietly as a family. And my husband took me on a tour of the local supermarkets and bookshops and town centres, so we could go and spot it everywhere it was, and that was nice. That was quite exciting.
Did you get lots of pictures of yourself with it?
Yeah, so we go, oh, look, it's in Sainsbury's. Oh, look, we found one in Asda, found one in WH Smith. And he's got his entire sort of online network out looking for copies. So I keep getting pictures from WH Smith travel and train stations and all sorts of different places, with people saying, found it, got one. So that's been really nice.
I think that's quite fun to see. We have authors that sometimes will be like, can you see my books? In fact, there's an author in our group who we had onto an author chat because her dad was in the group and posted a picture of himself really proudly, like of her really proudly, like signing the books. And he was like, this is my daughter. She's written a book, and we booked her in for an author chat.
That's excellent. What a great dad.
I know. So it worked perfectly, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. But yeah, going out and around, because obviously we get copies prior to publication day, so you've seen it, you've seen a copy, you've seen what it looks like. But when you actually go out and you go into, WH Smith, or you go into Asda, and you're like, it's actually there, it's actually real, it's actually there. That's really special. That's really exciting.
Yeah, and you can sort of say to people, that's mine.
Have this one. This is the one you want.
We've got 2 minutes left. Just reminders again about your book. Show off the cover. So people know what they're going to go and buy.
So this is my book, After Dark. You can tell it 'cause it's got the nice yellow spine. The blurb on the back says, welcome to a world where the women hold the power. They dominate workplaces, public spaces and government. They are no longer afraid to cross a dark car park, catch the last train or walk home alone. With curfew law in place, all men are electronically tagged and must stay home after 7 p.m. It changed things for the better until now. A woman is murdered late at night. Evidence suggests she knew her attacker. It couldn't have been a man because a curfew tag is a solid alibi, isn't it? There we go. Lock up the men. And we've got on the cover our young lady walking through the park at night in the dark on her own, in a perfectly safe and happy manner.
Excellent. I'm just trying to see who has put. No, it won't show me. Someone has said they write textbooks, and I was trying to see who it was. Because that is, their dad does the proud dad thing too. Did your dad do the proud dad thing?
This is going to sound really bad. I'm going to say no, because my family actually doesn't know that I have a secret life as a published author. So no, just me, really.
It's okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. It's been really lovely to come in and talk to everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the questions, everyone.